Hello, thank you for watching today's video. My name is Kate Payne and I'm an educational psychologist at Cognos. This is a trauma and executive function series supporting children and young people. In today's episode of the executive function series, we're going to be looking at task initiation and time management. So there are 11 executive functions in total, and whilst today we are focusing on these two, there are 9 other different elements that we'll be discussing in other videos, so please look out for them if you're interested in finding out more information about the others. So what are task initiation and time management? Task initiation is the ability to begin projects in a timely fashion. So it's for children to be able to start a task on their own. Time management is to be able to estimate how much time you have and then use this to stay within the time limits and deadlines. And for some young people with executive function difficulties, they might have difficulty in one or both of these areas. So if you're finding that you're working with a young person or living with a young person and they are always running late for things or never finishing tasks or taking quite slow to do things or not wanting to start something, then they may have difficulty with a task initiation and or time management. If this is the case, then it might be helpful to have a time with the young person to talk through task initiation and time management, explain what it is, provide them with the education around how they might have a strength or difficulty in this area. And so we have some different activities and examples to be able to aid this discussion. So first of all, you might play a game called the Detective Starter. And this is where one person is the detective, and so they will close their eyes, and then another person in the group is the starter. So they will start giving instructions to the rest of the group for everyone else to follow. And then it's up to the detective to try and work out who is the starter. And this opens up a discussion about the person needing to initiate the instructions for the rest of the group to follow. Or you might have a question time where you are in a group trying to work out who has different skills in starting different tasks. So it might be, who brushes their teeth without being reminded? Who gets up first in the morning? Who charges their devices before they run out? Who starts their homework as soon as they get home, or who leaves it to the last minute? So it's playing a fun little game together, asking questions, making it fun and engaging, but it's opening up the discussion about how some people might find it difficult to start tasks compared to other people. And then they might also come up with their own examples of times when they might have had difficulty with starting a task. So as an example, it might be around starting homework straight away, which is what we just mentioned a moment ago, or kind of picking the first thing to do on a list. So if they have difficulty with it, they might say that's a good way that they can start a task if they can do the first thing on the list. And you come up with together as a family different types of examples of when you might need to initiate a task. And then how would you describe time management to a young person? So there's a fun game called A Minute's Up, and that's where you make sure all clocks and watches and phones are all hidden. And then as a family, you have to try and work out when the minute is up and see who gets closest to that minute. And you can close your eyes and you all stand up and you sort of sit down when the minute is up. So open up that discussion about what it feels like to have a minute there without being aware of the time. Another thing you can do is trying to work out with the young person how many things they can do in a minute. So how many star jumps, or how many times can they write their name, or how many times can they walk around the living room, or it's short activities for them to estimate how many they'll do in the minute and then to have a go at doing it to see if they could meet what they thought they would be able to achieve. And all of this is doing is open up the discussion around time management and what it feels like to be able to complete a task in a specified time. And then if we're thinking about what examples we might be able to come up with. So there could be about spending too long on one question in an exam, especially if you're thinking about older students and kind of the importance of having equal weight or a good spread of time across the questions to get the best marks. And again, about the importance of having enough time to proofread, especially in an exam, so that you're not writing, and then not having the time at the end to proofread. Or it could be about finishing the task when needed. So does the young person, when they're in class, feel like they always haven't finished what they're doing before the teacher has moved on? And perhaps that would indicate that they have some difficulty with time management. So by doing these discussions with the young people about task initiation or time management, hopefully they start to have an understanding of what their skills are within these areas and potentially how they might find it difficult to do one or both of these. And if that's how the conversation goes along, then you might be able to introduce the idea that actually there are strategies that we can use to teach and support task initiation and time management. And it's highlighting that we all have strengths, we all have difficulties, and we all find ways in which to cope with and develop our skills in the areas that we have difficulty with. And it's the importance of making the young person aware of what the strategies are and why they're using them. So it's not being done to them, but they're actively involved in the process and they understand. And even in children who are perhaps in key stage 1 or key stage 2, it's still really important to have them understand and be actively using these strategies so that they can in the future have more independence in knowing what strategies work for them in the areas that they may have some difficulty with. So if we're thinking about strategies to support task initiation, the young person may be able to come up with their own, and that's fantastic. And so they'll be empowered to be able to use these strategies. But some examples, if that's not the case, there's one about trying to write the first sentence or answer the first question in the first minute. Or perhaps, just do the task for 5 minutes and see how you get on. And actually, for some children, once they've started the task, it's much easier to carry on. But the thought of doing the whole task can feel really overwhelming. So actually, reducing the expectations, you just got to do one thing in 1 minute, off you go. That could be really reassuring to break that down. Or saying to them, when you're in class, have a look at your peers, find out what they're doing, following them, how they start the task. And if they do that, they might be able to get going after that and carry on. Or developing that notion of making a good enough start. So for some children, they might worry about making a mistake or getting it wrong or not having a good enough answer. And these are things can be barriers to them starting their task. So actually saying to them, it's good enough, just have a go. We can go back and change it if we need to later, but it's just about starting and it being good enough. And that can be enough to sometimes help them to be able to make a start on that task. And thinking about some strategies to support time management. One strategy can be a timer. So at home in the mornings, if your child is always running late or taking ages to do the morning routine, you can perhaps say, okay, here's a timer for eating breakfast. Here's a timer for getting your uniform on, and setting timers throughout the morning for them to try and keep to. And if they're a younger child, you might want to use a visual sound timer so that they can understand how the time is going. And for the older ones, you might use a stopwatch or a phone to be able to do this. And timers are used quite frequently in school as well. So if a timer does work for them, this is something that the teachers can use in the classroom. Reminders can also be helpful. So you have 2 minutes left, you have 1 minute left to give them prompts about how much time they have left before the task is finished. We're also working in 5-minute bursts. So if they have a piece of homework to do that is half an hour long and they always find it really difficult to complete the work within that time frame, perhaps breaking that down into 5-minute chunks. So actually within 5 minutes, you have to complete 2 questions. In the next 5 minutes, complete to questions and carry on doing that. So you're breaking it down into much smaller chunks so they can manage their time much more effectively. And this is really helpful if you're thinking about a longer task, perhaps a piece of coursework that a young person has to do. The idea that you have a couple of months to complete a coursework can feel really overwhelming, but breaking that down into much shorter chunks can make the time much more manageable to be able to complete. So I would really encourage you to be able to sit down with a young person and have these discussions around task initiation and time management. Here is some diagrams that you can use to aid this discussion, to have a really visual tool that the young person can complete and keep hold of afterwards. So whilst you're having this discussion, you can come up with a definition together, for example, for task initiation, and using the child's own words, write a definition about what it means. Then ask the young person to draw a picture to represent what that means to them. And then come up together with some real life relevant examples that the young person has experienced themselves or it's experienced within the family. So they're really tangible and relevant to that young person. And then together come up with 1 or 2 strategies that you're going to work together as a family to do to be able to really develop that skill. And you can come back to this at a later date to review how it has gone. And these are really helpful to hold on to so the young person has a really visual reminder of that discussion and can be taken into school as well for them to see. You can make these as creative and fun as you want and make them bright colours and lovely things that the young person can do. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll be very aware of this toolbox of strategies. And this is the idea that all these videos and these discussions are working towards the young person having their own toolbox of strategies. So the young person is aware of their strengths, they're aware of the 1 or 2 things they might find difficult, and then they know which strategies really help them in this area. So it would be fantastic for the young person to be able to, by the end of these experiences and discussions, they know I find it really difficult to start a task, and I find it really helpful when I write down a checklist of things to do and I do the first one within the first minute. And if I can do that, that really helps me to be able to just get going and start. And if the young person can reach that point, that is really, really helpful for them and is going to help them in their future when they're in secondary school or in post-16 settings or into adulthood as well. And that's what we're working towards, to really develop their independence. So thank you for watching the episode today within our executive function series. If you are interested, there are many other videos available on the 9 other areas of executive function skills. Thank you for watching.